The storm had rolled in faster than anyone expected. Thick clouds covered the sky, turning evening into something close to night. The waves grew louder and heavier as they slammed against the shore. Most people had already rushed inside, locking their windows and pulling their curtains close. But one person remained outside longer than he should have. He was a quiet human mechanic who lived near the old docks. He preferred working with engines and metal instead of dealing with people, and on most days he kept to himself. He had been fixing a small generator inside his workshop when he heard the first unusual sound. It wasn't thunder, though thunder shook the sky again and again that evening. It wasn't wind either. It was more like a short repeating beep coming from the direction of the water. At first he ignored it, thinking it was just another ship's system glitching in the storm. But it didn't stop. The sound repeated again and again, each time fading slightly as if begging someone to hear it before it was too late. He set his tools aside and wiped his hands on a cloth. Something inside him told him this wasn't a normal signal. He grabbed a waterproof lamp and stepped out into the cold air. Rain instantly soaked the front of his jacket, and the wind pushed against him with every step he took. He walked toward the docks, following the faint blinking pattern that the signal made. It almost felt like a heartbeat, slow, tired, and fading got as he reached the far edge of the old pier. He stopped. The sea looked wild, almost angry. Waves rose so high that he could see white foam even in the low light. Lightning split the dark clouds, giving him brief flashes of the water's surface. That's when he saw something large floating far out, tilting to one side as if it could sink at any moment. The red blinking light came from that direction. At first he thought it was just a massive cargo boat caught in the storm. But the shape felt wrong. Too smooth. No sharp edges. No tall mast. It looked like a giant smooth shell made of metal. And then another lightning flash hit the sky, and he saw clearly that this was no ordinary ship. It was something he had never seen before, something that didn't match any human design. It was an alien vessel, huge and sinking faster than he expected. He should have turned back. The coast guards were far away, and the storm was only getting worse. But then something else moved near the sinking ship. For a second, he thought it was debris being tossed around. But no, this thing was alive. It was large, dark, and struggling wildly against something pulling it down. When the next flash of lightning hit, he finally understood what he was looking at. It was a massive dragon-like creature. Not a creature from human myths, no fire breathing, no giant wings, but something clearly alien, shaped like a dragon yet different in ways that made it difficult to describe. Its long body glimmered with scales that seemed part organic and part metallic. Long ropes or chains held it to the sinking vessel, pulling it deeper every minute. The creature tried to lift its head above the waves, but the weight of the chains forced it downward. Its eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, were filled with panic. Each time it managed to rise above the water for a few seconds, another wave crashed over it and pushed it under again. If the ship went fully under, the creature would be dragged with it. The mechanic felt a sudden squeeze in his chest. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something that made him feel he couldn't stand there and watch this living being drown. It didn't matter who made those chains, or why the creature was tied to the ship. Right now, it was suffering. Right now, it needed help. He ran back to his workshop, grabbed a coil of rope, a heavy cutting tool, and a small emergency flotation device. Then he sprinted back to the edge of the pier, tied the rope around his waist, and secured the other end around a steel post. The rain hit his face so hard it stung, but he didn't slow down. He checked his gear once more, took a deep breath, and jumped into the cold water. The shock hit him instantly. The water felt like ice, and the waves seemed to swallow him whole. He fought his way upward, gasping for air as another wave crashed over him. He knew he couldn't swim all the way to the creature on his own. So he kicked hard until he reached a floating maintenance board tethered near the pier, untied it, climbed onto it, and began paddling with his arms and legs. It was slow. Every wave pushed him back. But he didn't stop. The blinking red signal grew louder the closer he got, guiding him like a desperate voice in the dark. As he reached the alien ship, he could truly see how enormous it was. Half of it had already sunk. Strange markings covered its surface symbols or language. He couldn't understand, but he didn't come for the ship. A low sound echoed across the water. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a cry. It was something between a groan and a plea. The creature's head rose again, and its eyes met his. For the first time, he realized it wasn't thrashing at him. It was thrashing because it was terrified. It was drowning. The mechanic didn't hesitate. He paddled closer until he reached the creature's side. The dragon-like being was huge, its scales cold and rough beneath his hands. He could feel it shaking, not from rage, but from exhaustion. Its breath came out in sharp bursts, barely above the waves. "I'm here," he said out loud without thinking, even though he knew it probably didn't understand. "Hold on. Please just hold on." Another wave hit them both. He grabbed the nearest chain and followed it underwater for a moment until he reached the locking mechanism. It wasn't anything human tools were built for. But he didn't give up. He used the cutting tool, struggling to keep it steady under the moving water. Every second counted. Every second the creature sank a little more. The chain sparks flashed under the water as he worked on it, the tool grinding against metal that felt impossibly strong. But a spark wasn't enough. His lungs burned. He pushed his legs toward the surface and took a huge breath before diving again. Time felt slow. The storm didn't matter anymore. The cold didn't matter. All that mattered was breaking that chain before the ship pulled everything under. Finally, after what felt like forever, the chain gave way with a heavy snap. The creature lifted slightly, but it was still being dragged down by others. It groaned again, weaker this time. "I'm not done," the mechanic muttered, half to himself, half to the creature. "Don't give up." He went from chain to chain, cutting each one with shaking arms. The waves knocked him off again and again, but he climbed back each time. The creature tried to help by lifting itself, but it was too weak. The ship sank even lower. The water around them began pulling downward, forming a circle of swirling pressure. He knew this was the last chance. If he didn't break the final chain now, the creature would be pulled under with the ship. He took one final breath, one deep breath that filled his lungs completely. Then he dived for the last chain, gripping the tool with both hands, and put everything he had into cutting through the metal. The pressure of the sinking ship pulled at him, dragging him downward. His chest felt ready to burst, but at the last second, the final link snapped. A sudden force pulled him upward, water pushing him away from the sinking ship as it finally slipped entirely under the waves. He burst through the surface, gasping, coughing, unable to see clearly. Then he felt something move beside him. The creature's head rose above the water, lifting him slightly with its snout as if keeping him from sinking. Its eyes no longer held panic, now they held something else. Confusion, relief, maybe even gratitude. The storm still raged around them, but for a moment, everything felt quiet. The mechanic wiped water from his eyes and looked at the creature. It breathed heavily, exhausted but free. He had saved it, and he didn't yet know that this small act, done in the middle of a wild storm, would change everything that came after. The storm had not ended, but the water felt different now. The sinking ship was gone beneath the waves, leaving only darkness and foam behind. The mechanic held on to the side of the floating board, breath shaking in his chest. His arms felt like they were made of stone after fighting those chains, and his body kept trembling from the cold. But he stayed conscious, forcing himself to breathe slowly, while the rain hit his face again and again. Beside him, the freed creature fought to stay above the surface. It wasn't thrashing anymore, but it was clearly exhausted. Its long body rose and sank with the waves, and its breaths came in long, shaky bursts. Every movement looked heavy, as if the chains had drained all its strength. The mechanic slowly reached out and touched its side. The scales felt rough, almost like cooled metal mixed with stone. He wasn't sure if touching it was safe, but he did it anyway. The creature did not pull away. It turned its head slightly, as if acknowledging that he was still there. "Good? Good," he whispered, though he doubted the creature understood the words. "You're free now. But we need to get out of here." The creature blinked slowly, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The storm made it hard to see, but he could still feel the creature's faint shivers. It had been underwater for too long. If it stayed here any longer, it could easily drown again or lose the little strength it had left. He grabbed the rope tied around his waist and pulled himself back onto the floating board. It wobbled under his weight, but it held him. He then moved closer to the creature's neck, trying to find a safe place to hold onto without hurting it. "Follow me," he said, but the wind stole his words. He knew the creature didn't understand language, but maybe it understood his intention. He pointed toward the faint lights of the shoreline, barely visible through the storm. "Land that way?" The creature turned its head in the same direction. It seemed uncertain, but it made a weak sound, a soft hum, low and shaky. The mechanic wasn't sure if it was pain, confusion, or agreement. But he didn't have time to guess. He tugged on the rope tied to the board, steering it slowly toward the shore. The creature moved slightly behind him, each motion slow, as if every muscle ached. The waves pushed them around, but the mechanic kept adjusting the rope, guiding both himself and the creature closer to land. It took a long time, longer than he expected. His arms were sore, his eyes burned from the salt water, and he could feel his legs going numb. But he didn't stop. He kept paddling with whatever strength remained in him. And strangely, whenever he felt himself slowing down too much, he sensed the creature lifting its head again, as if reminding itself and him to keep going. The storm finally began to weaken. The wind softened. The waves became a little less violent. Gradually, the dark water shifted into a calmer rhythm. And through the fading rain, the mechanic saw something hopeful, the outline of the shoreline growing closer. His heart felt lighter the moment the board scraped against shallow rocks. He jumped off and stood on the uneven ground, his legs shaking so badly he almost fell. He quickly turned back toward the creature, which struggled to move forward. Using his hands, he guided its head, helping it reach the shallower water. When the creature finally reached a place where it could rest its body on the gentle slope of the shore, it let out a long, tired breath. The sound was deep, warm, and filled with exhaustion. Its body lay partly in the water, partly on the wet sand, trembling lightly as it tried to recover from the long struggle. The mechanic leaned down beside it, placing a hand on its neck. "You're safe now," he said softly. "We made it." The creature blinked slowly and seemed to relax. For the first time, it wasn't fighting the storm or the chains or the water. It simply rested. He looked around the beach, making sure no one else had seen what happened. The shoreline was empty, and the storm had chased everyone away. It was just him and the creature alone, drenched and worn out. After a few minutes, he noticed something unusual about the creature's neck. Beneath the scales was a collar-like device, half mechanical, half organic. It was damaged, broken in several places, probably from the struggle with the chains. The device pulsed faintly with a blue glow, flickering like a dying battery. Curious, he touched it gently. The creature flinched, but didn't move away. He studied the device more closely. It looked like a mix of alien technology and living tissue. He had never seen anything like it, yet something about the structure made sense to him. He couldn't fully understand it, but he could recognize damaged parts, disconnected circuits, and broken connections. You were chained and controlled, he murmured, more to himself than to the creature. The creature's eyes softened, as if it understood the tone of his voice, even if it didn't understand the words. It lowered its head slightly, almost in a tired nod. He looked toward the dark sea. That alien ship had been no accident. It had been holding this creature captive. But why? He didn't know. And he didn't want to imagine what would have happened if the ship hadn't sunk, or if he hadn't heard that distress signal. He sat beside the creature for a long time, letting himself catch his breath. He pulled his wet jacket tighter around himself, thinking about what to do next. He couldn't leave the creature here, not in its weak state, not with that strange collar, half broken and sparking. It needed help, and he was the only one who knew it was here. Slowly, the creature lifted its head again and looked at him. The mechanic felt something shift inside him. The creature wasn't angry. It wasn't dangerous at this moment. Instead, its eyes held a silent question. Why did you help me? He didn't have a simple answer. He only knew that he couldn't let anything drown if he had the power to stop it. Even if that thing was an alien dragon chained to a sinking ship, you were in pain, he finally said. That's all. The creature blinked again, then lowered its head gently onto the sand, breathing slowly but steadily. He stood up and looked toward the hills near the beach. His workshop wasn't too far from here. It had shelter, heat, and tools. Maybe he couldn't repair alien technology perfectly, but he could at least make the creature comfortable and try to understand the broken collar. Can you move? He asked softly. The creature tried lifting its body. It managed to lift part of it, but then collapsed again. It was too weak. It's okay, he whispered. Rest. I'll figure something out. He walked back to the waterline and placed a hand on its neck again. The creature leaned slightly into his touch. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't confusion. It was trust, small and fragile, but real. He stayed with it until the storm fully faded into a gentle drizzle. He didn't leave its side, and it didn't take its eyes off him. Two beings who shouldn't have met, now sitting together on a quiet shore as the night finally calmed. The mechanic didn't know how this strange creature ended up chained, or who was behind it. But he knew one thing clearly. This was only the beginning. Saving the creature from drowning was just the first step. Something bigger was coming, and he could feel it. But for now, he let the creature rest, knowing they would face whatever came next together. The storm had passed, leaving the beach quiet and wet, with only the gentle lap of waves against the shore. The mechanic stayed beside the creature, still unsure what it really was. It looked like a dragon, yet it was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Its scales shimmered faintly in the dim light, reflecting the moon and the wet sand. Its body was massive, and its limbs were thick with strength, but every movement it made showed exhaustion. He had learned one important thing already. The creature was intelligent. Not like a normal animal. It watched him carefully, studied his movements, and reacted to his voice in small ways. When he moved closer, it flinched. When he spoke softly, it relaxed slightly. There was understanding there, even if it didn't speak any human language. He knew he couldn't just leave it on the beach. Even though it was free from the chains, it was still weak and vulnerable. He needed to help it recover. He scanned the shore, thinking of places where he could take it. His workshop was a possibility, but the creature was far too large to carry by himself. Besides, the journey from the beach to the workshop was not easy. It was uneven ground, rocky patches, and slippery mud from the storm. He sat down slowly on the sand and studied the creature. Its breathing was heavy but steady. Its eyes followed him, glowing faintly in the dark. He remembered the broken collar around its neck, flickering with soft blue light. It looked painful, and he wondered if that device was still controlling it somehow. He didn't want to take any chances. The last thing he wanted was to hurt it or trigger something dangerous. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's get you somewhere safe." The creature didn't move immediately, but it didn't resist either. He could sense hesitation. It had clearly been treated badly before. The chains, the collar, the sinking ship, all of that had left a mark, not just on its body, but in its mind. Trust was not something it could give easily. But it didn't try to run. That was the first sign of hope that he needed a plan. He grabbed a few boards from the pier, dragging them close to the shore. The boards were wet and slippery, but sturdy. He thought if he could make a sort of raft, it might be easier to move the creature. It wouldn't be perfect, but it could help him guide it without forcing it to swim too far. He worked quickly, tying the boards together with the rope he still carried. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the air fresh but cold. He wiped his hands on his jacket and gestured toward the creature. "Come on," he said gently. "I'll help you." The creature tilted its head, watching him. Slowly, it tried to lift part of its body. He could see the effort in every movement, the strain in its muscles, the fatigue in its eyes. But it didn't resist. Step by step, it moved closer to the makeshift raft. When it finally nudged itself onto the boards, he carefully guided it, supporting its weight so it wouldn't fall into the shallow water, but it was a slow process. Every few steps, it would collapse slightly, and he would have to adjust the boards, push gently, or hold part of its body. But he didn't complain. He had never saved anything like this before, but he couldn't leave it to struggle alone. Once the creature was on the raft, he tied the rope around one end and began pulling it toward the workshop area. The journey was difficult. The sand was soft in some places, uneven in others. Rocks and puddles made it tricky to keep balance. At times, the creature would shift its weight suddenly, and he would have to brace himself to prevent both of them from falling. But they kept moving forward, slowly and carefully, until the familiar outline of his workshop came into view. He opened the door carefully, unsure how the creature would react to the enclosed space. Surprisingly, it walked in without hesitation, though its movements were cautious. He guided it to a corner of the workshop where he had cleared space and laid down some dry cloth and blankets. The creature sank onto them gratefully, letting out a long sigh. He knelt beside it, examining the collar again. Its flickering light seemed less stable now, pulsing weakly as if struggling to stay on. He could see damage from the chains and the sinking ship metal fused with its skin, wires torn and exposed. He had no idea what the device was for exactly, but he could see broken parts. Maybe he could make it stop hurting the creature, at least temporarily. "Hold still," he said softly, brushing his hand along the damaged collar. The creature flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. It seemed to trust him enough for now. He carefully examined the device, gently adjusting wires and pressing metal joints back into place. Sparks flew once or twice, making him jump, but the creature didn't react angrily. It just watched, breathing heavily, letting him do what he could. Hours passed. The creature didn't move much, just rested on the blankets, occasionally shifting slightly. He stayed with it, offering water from a bottle, small food scraps he had in the workshop, and warmth from blankets. He didn't speak too much. Words were meaningless to it, but he hummed softly at times, hoping the sound would be comforting. The creature seemed to respond, lifting its head slightly, closing its eyes briefly, and relaxing its body. He learned small things about it over time. The way it moved, even in exhaustion, showed incredible strength. The way it blinked, sometimes slowly, sometimes rapidly, showed emotion. The faint glow of its eyes changed color slightly, depending on how it felt blue when calm, faint yellow when alert, almost white when afraid. He began to notice patterns, small signs that helped him understand what it needed before it tried to communicate in other ways. That it became clear to him that the creature wasn't dangerous, at least not now. Its aggression had been used against it by whoever had chained it to that ship. But now, free and resting, it was vulnerable, fragile, and dependent on him. The mechanic realized the weight of responsibility. Saving it from the sinking ship was only the beginning. He had to care for it now, guide it, and protect it until it regained strength. At one point, the creature shifted its massive body and looked directly at him. Its eyes glowed faintly blue, steady and calm. It tilted its head slightly, as if asking a silent question. The mechanic smiled faintly, though he was tired and sore. "I don't know everything about you," he said softly, "but I'll keep you safe. That's all I can promise right now." The creature blinked slowly, then rested its head again. That simple gesture felt like acceptance, and it gave him a strange sense of relief. That night fell over the workshop. The rain outside had stopped completely. The air was cool, and the quiet was almost peaceful. The creature remained on the blankets, breathing steadily. The mechanic sat nearby, exhausted but alert, listening to the soft sounds it made. Occasionally, he would adjust the blankets, offer a sip of water, or just sit and watch, making sure it was okay. He couldn't help thinking about what had happened earlier. The sinking ship, the chains, the storm. He couldn't imagine what it had endured, how terrified it must have been, or how long it had been trapped. Yet here it was, alive, resting, and somehow trusting him. That thought made him feel a deep sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Hours passed slowly, and eventually he felt sleep tugging at him. He sat back on a chair, careful to keep one eye on the creature. Even in sleep, he stayed alert. It was impossible to forget what it had been through, and he wanted to be ready if it needed anything in the night. He thought about tomorrow. They would need food, warmth, and care. Maybe he could figure out the collar, or at least make it stop flickering and hurting. Maybe he could understand a little more about what the creature was, where it came from, and why it had been chained. But he also knew that none of that mattered as much as keeping it safe for now. As he sat quietly, the creature shifted slightly, moving its head closer to him. It was small, almost imperceptible, but he felt it. Its trust was growing. For the first time, the mechanic realized that saving it wasn't just about freeing it from chains. It was about forming a bond, understanding each other, and facing the unknown together. The night stretched on, quiet and calm. The storm had ended, leaving only memories of the chaos. But something new had begun, something neither of them could fully understand yet. He smiled faintly to himself and whispered, "We'll figure it out. Together." The creature blinked slowly in response, its faint blue glow steady now, almost calm. For the first time, he felt a small sense of peace. They had survived the storm. They had survived the sinking ship. And now, for the first time, they had a chance to recover, to trust, and to face whatever came next together. The next morning, the workshop was quiet, except for the soft sound of the creature breathing. It had shifted slightly during the night, resting its massive body on the blankets he had laid out. The mechanic sat nearby, sipping a small cup of warm tea, watching it carefully. Even though it looked calm now, he knew that the world outside could still be dangerous for something like it. Chains, drowning, storms. It had survived so much already, but he couldn't risk leaving it alone for a moment. He had spent most of the night thinking about the broken collar around its neck. It was clearly alien technology, something he had never seen before. It had wires fused with its skin, soft tissue wrapped around small circuits, and a faint blue glow that pulsed with the creature's breathing. He didn't know what it did exactly, whether it was a control device, a tracking tool, or something else entirely, but he could tell it caused discomfort. When he had gently touched it the night before, the creature had flinched slightly, as if it remembered pain. Now, with the morning light coming through the window, he decided he had to try to fix it better, or at least stabilize it. He gathered tools, small scraps of metal, wire, and a few pieces of old electronics he had lying around. He carefully approached the creature. It watched him silently, its head tilting slightly, as if trying to understand his actions. He moved slowly, speaking softly, hoping the tone of his voice would calm it. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to make this better." The creature shifted slightly, leaning its massive body toward him, and he took that as permission to work. He studied the collar carefully, tracing the broken connections and examining the wires fused into the alien tissue. He didn't know exactly what he was doing, but he knew that making careful adjustments and preventing sparks or pressure might help relieve some discomfort. Hours passed. He worked slowly, stopping whenever the creature flinched or tensed. He cleaned some of the damaged metal, bent others back into place, and used makeshift insulation from scraps to prevent accidental shocks. The creature stayed still for most of the time, breathing heavily, but trusting him enough not to panic. Finally, after a long morning, the collar's blue glow stabilized. It no longer flickered violently, and the creature shifted slightly, testing its neck movements. It let out a soft, low hum, a sound that was neither growl nor cry, but something in between. The mechanic felt a small surge of relief. He didn't know if the collar was completely safe, but at least it no longer seemed to hurt it. As he stepped back, the creature raised its head and looked at him. There was something in its eyes: curiosity, intelligence, and maybe a hint of gratitude. It was the first time he felt that it truly recognized him as more than just a human who had saved it from the sea, but that sense of peace was short-lived. From the window, he noticed movement in the sky above the distant coastline. Strange lights appeared over the ocean, blinking rapidly and moving with purpose. At first, he thought they might be drones or ships from a nearby port, but the way they moved was deliberate, coordinated, and unlike any human craft he had ever seen. His heart raced. He knew instantly that these were not ordinary travelers. They were looking for the creature. The creature stiffened. Its tail lashed the floor lightly, a subtle warning that it recognized the danger even before he did. Its eyes glowed brighter, shifting from calm blue to pale yellow. It had been hunted before. He had seen the chains, felt the pain it had endured, and now he understood why it had reacted this way. "We need to hide," he whispered, though he didn't know if the creature understood the words. It didn't matter, its instincts told it everything. The creature lowered its head slightly, turning toward the back of the workshop where he had cleared extra space. He moved with it, opening a small trapdoor in the floor he had used for storage. The space beneath was narrow but strong, enough to hold both of them temporarily. The creature hesitated for a moment, then slid down into the space. Its massive body bent carefully, folding as much as possible without hurting itself. The mechanic followed, crouching close beside it, trying to remain silent. Above them, the strange lights moved faster, scanning the coastline. He could hear faint sounds of engines, but they were unlike anything he had heard before, soft, almost melodic, but mechanical and sharp at the same time. He held his breath as the lights passed over the workshop. The creature's breathing was shallow, and he felt the weight of its massive head press gently against his shoulder. They waited together, motionless, as the world above searched for something that might not even know how to hide. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. The lights lingered in the distance, scanning, then moved on slowly. The creature remained tense, muscles coiled for action. Finally, the sounds faded, and the lights disappeared beyond the horizon. It was a small victory, but it meant the danger had not passed. Whoever was searching for this creature would not give up easily. The mechanic gently stroked its head. "You're safe for now," he whispered. "But we need a plan." The creature tilted its head, as if acknowledging his words. It didn't speak, but its gestures were deliberate. It nudged toward the trapdoor, then back toward him, then to the collar. He understood. The collar was a key part of why they were being hunted. If the device could be repaired, deactivated, or at least stabilized, it might give them a better chance to hide or escape. He nodded slowly. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." For the rest of the day, he worked carefully. He cleaned tools, prepared materials, and watched the creature as it rested. He studied its movements, the way its scales reflected light, the subtle changes in color that seemed to show emotion or thought. He tried to understand it not just as a strange creature, but as a being with intelligence, feelings, and instincts. By evening, he had managed to reinforce some parts of the collar, making it less likely to cause harm if the creature moved suddenly. The device still pulsed faintly, but now it was steady, and he felt a small sense of accomplishment. The creature seemed more relaxed, stretching slightly, and even nudging him gently, as if to say thank you. As darkness fell, he decided to prepare the workshop for the night. He closed the windows, sealed small gaps to prevent drafts, and placed blankets around the creature so it could rest safely. He made a small fire in a corner to warm the air, careful to keep it far enough away from the creature. The creature shifted, curling slightly, but keeping an eye on him. Its eyes glowed softly, now a calm blue again. He sat nearby, tired but alert, thinking about what had happened. Today had been more than survival. It had been a lesson in trust, patience, and understanding. He realized that the creature had been through unimaginable pain, and yet it had not attacked him. It had accepted his help, allowed him to care for it, and even responded to his presence with subtle gestures. It was forming a connection, one built slowly and carefully, and he knew that bond was fragile, but powerful. The night stretched on quietly. Outside, the distant sounds of the ocean mixed with the occasional rustle of trees. Inside, the creature breathed steadily, occasionally twitching an ear or flicking its tail. He felt a strange sense of responsibility, more than he had ever felt before. He had saved it from drowning, from chains, and from immediate danger. But now he had to keep it safe from everything else: hunters, storms, and the unknown forces that might still come for it. He leaned back, exhausted, and whispered softly, "We've survived today. We'll survive tomorrow too." The creature blinked slowly, eyes glowing faintly. He took that as agreement. In the quiet of the workshop, surrounded by tools, blankets, and the gentle pulse of the collar, he realized something important. They were no longer just survivor and rescued. They were allies, partners, two beings who had found each other in a world that could be harsh, dangerous, and unpredictable. The night carried on, quiet and steady. Outside, the world seemed calm. Inside, the creature slept lightly, one eye occasionally opening to watch him. He stayed alert, ready for whatever would come next. The first steps had been taken, but the journey was far from over. And yet, for the first time, he felt that together they could face anything. Morning came quietly, with pale sunlight slipping through the cracks of the workshop walls. The mechanic sat beside the creature, which had shifted slightly during the night, but had mostly rested. Its breathing was steady, and its body no longer trembled as much. The storm, a sinking ship, and the terrifying chase in the sky seemed far away for the moment. But he knew better than to believe they were truly safe. He sipped a small cup of warm tea, feeling the quiet around them. For the first time in many days, He could look at the creature and imagine a future where it might recover fully. But the faint pulse of the collar reminded him that danger had not gone away. He studied it carefully, noting that it seemed stable now, but he couldn't remove it entirely. Whoever had put it there might still be able to track or control it if they tried. The creature, noticing his attention on the collar, lifted its head slightly and made a soft hum. It was a sound of understanding, not alarm. He smiled faintly, kneeling beside it. "We'll keep it safe," he whispered. "We'll figure out a way to stop them if they come." He had a plan forming in his mind. The workshop offered shelter, but it wasn't a long-term solution. It was too small, too visible from the coastline. If the hunters returned, they could scan the area quickly, find the creature, and capture it again. He needed a more secure place, a hideout somewhere remote, where they could rest and plan their next move. He had an idea. A few miles inland, there was a small abandoned lighthouse on a hill overlooking the sea. It was isolated, built strong, and had storage space inside. It wasn't perfect, but it could work. If he could move the creature there safely, they might have a better chance to regroup. He rose, stretching sore muscles from the night before. "Come on," he said softly to the creature. "We need to move. There's a place I want to show you." The creature blinked slowly, then nudged toward him. Its movements were cautious, but willing. He prepared the makeshift raft from the previous day, carefully positioning it to help guide the creature toward a nearby shallow river. It wasn't far, and the current would carry them inland gently. The creature slipped onto the raft without resistance, trusting him enough to follow his lead. The journey was slow. Every movement had to be careful. The raft shifted in the shallow water, and he had to push and pull to keep it stable. The creature's body was still heavy with exhaustion, and it occasionally groaned or shifted uncomfortably. He murmured softly to it, offering reassurance, even though he knew it might not understand his words. As they floated, the air grew colder. Clouds had begun to gather again, and a faint mist hovered above the water. He felt a chill run down his spine, not from the cold, but from the awareness that they were not alone. The strange crafts had searched for the creature before, and he knew they could return at any moment. "Stay calm," he whispered, gripping the rope tightly. "We'll be okay." The creature's head rose, its eyes glowing softly in the dim light. It seemed to sense the same presence, the same threat. Its muscles tensed slightly, preparing for action if needed. He adjusted the raft, steering them closer to the riverbank, where they could make the next move on land. Finally, they reached the river's edge. He helped the creature slide onto the muddy shore, steadying it as it tried to rise. Its legs shook slightly, but it stood with his support. He patted its massive side gently. "Almost there," he said. "Just a little further." They began the walk toward the lighthouse. The path was uneven, with rocks and roots hidden beneath the mist. He guided the creature slowly, moving carefully to prevent it from slipping or stumbling. Every few steps it paused, lowering its massive head as if checking for danger. He stayed close, offering quiet reassurance and steady hands. Hours passed as they moved inland. The fog grew thicker, and the forest around them seemed alive with sound. Leaves rustled, branches creaked, and distant bird calls echoed through the trees. He kept alert, scanning the shadows for movement, knowing that even a small mistake could put them at risk. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they reached the base of the hill where the lighthouse stood. It was tall and sturdy, abandoned but intact. Windows were broken in a few places, and the paint had worn away, but the structure was solid. Inside, there was room for both of them to rest, and a small storage area where he could keep tools and supplies. He helped the creature climb the slope. Its massive body moved slowly, but it followed his guidance, trusting him enough to rely on his direction. Finally, they reached the entrance. The mechanic pushed open the heavy door, and the creatures stepped inside. The interior smelled of old wood and dust, but it was dry and safe. He set up blankets and mats for the creature, giving it space to rest comfortably. It lowered its body onto them, breathing heavily, but more relaxed than it had been for days. He smiled, feeling a small sense of relief. For now, they were safe, but safety was temporary. From the window, he could see the horizon, and he knew the hunters would not stop searching. They were patient, organized, and relentless. The creature's collar, even stabilized, might still allow them to locate it. He needed to think quickly, to create a plan that would protect them both. He began inspecting the lighthouse more closely, checking the structure, the windows, and the surroundings. If the hunters arrived, they would need to block the creature's escape routes and create some kind of defense. He remembered the tools and scraps he had brought along and thought about how to use them creatively. With some effort, he could rig simple barriers, alarms, and traps. They wouldn't stop the hunters completely, but they might buy enough time for them to escape if needed. The creature observed him quietly, head resting on the blankets, but eyes open, glowing faintly. It was calm, yet alert. He realized that it trusted him now more than before, and that trust was precious. One wrong move could destroy it, and he would never forgive himself if he failed. He worked through the evening, arranging supplies, reinforcing the floorboards, and clearing space for movement. The creature occasionally shifted, adjusting its position or nudging him gently, reminding him of its presence and reliance. He paused occasionally, looking at it, wondering how it had survived so much before meeting him. It had been chained, drowning. Hunted yet, it was still alive, intelligent, and capable of forming bonds. Night fell, and the workshop was quiet again, this time under the protective walls of the lighthouse. Outside, the mist rolled over the hills, hiding them from view. Inside, he prepared a small fire in the old fireplace to keep them warm, careful not to place it too close to the creature. The flames flickered, casting shadows on the walls, and the creature watched them calmly, its tail curling around its body. He sat beside it, exhausted but alert, thinking about the future. They had escaped immediate danger, but the hunters would not give up. He needed a long-term solution, a way to protect the creature permanently, or find somewhere safe where they could disappear from sight. He didn't know how to do that yet, but he knew he would try everything possible. The creature shifted slightly, leaning its head toward him. It was a simple gesture, but it carried meaning: trust, companionship, and understanding. He reached out and touched its head gently, feeling the warmth beneath the scales. "We'll face them together," he whispered. "Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. You're not alone anymore." It blinked slowly, and the faint blue glow of its eyes returned to a calm, steady light. He felt a sense of peace, small but real. They had survived storms, chains, and hunters. They had found safety, if only temporary. And for the first time, he felt that with careful planning and trust, they might survive whatever else the world would throw at them. The night grew darker, but inside the lighthouse, they rested together. The creature's breathing was steady, and the mechanic finally allowed himself a moment to sit back, exhausted but determined. They had come so far already, and the journey was far from over. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough to face the unknown that lay ahead.